Ferrari arrived in Austria believing they had finally fixed their car. By Sunday evening, the data told a completely different story, and it was a story Maranello did not want anyone to read. Because buried inside one disappointing afternoon at the Red Bull Ring was the answer to a question that had been haunting Ferrari for weeks. Not why the car was slow here, but why it had ever looked fast in the first place. And the real answer wasn't on any upgrade sheet. If you enjoy Formula One stories that go past the result and into the data the teams actually see, subscribe now because this one only gets stranger from here. To understand what Austria exposed, you have to go back 3 weeks to Barcelona. That weekend, Lewis Hamilton did something he had never done in red before. He won. His first victory for Ferrari in a car carrying a brand new engine upgrade, unlocked by the championship's equalization mechanism known as ADUO. For a fan base starved of good news, it felt like a turning point. The headlines wrote themselves. Ferrari were back. The sleeping giant had woken up. And it's worth understanding why that engine mattered so much. In 2026, the rules include a mechanism that measures every manufacturer's power unit and lets the ones who fall behind catch up. Ferrari's engine had been benchmarked as more than 4% down on the strongest unit on the grid, a gap that, in Formula One terms, is an ocean. So they were granted the tokens to bring an upgrade, a new cylinder design built to burn more efficiently when the temperatures climb. In Barcelona, with that engine in the car, Hamilton won. So of course the conclusion was simple. The upgrade worked, the deficit was closing, the giant was rising. Team principal Fred Vasseur, though, tried to cool it down. He kept telling anyone who would listen not to read too much into one race. At the time, it sounded like a manager managing expectations. In hindsight, it sounds like a man who had already seen the data and knew something the celebrations didn't. Then came Austria. And from the very first day, something felt off. On Friday, in brutal heat high in the Styrian Mountains, Ferrari were nowhere near the front. Hamilton ended practice 5th. Leclerc 8th, both drivers complaining about balance, about grip that came and went. But here's where it got interesting. When engineers up and down the paddock studied the GPS traces, Ferrari appeared to be holding engine power back on the straights. To optimists, that meant one thing: Barcelona, all over again. A quiet Friday hiding a fast car. And there was real history behind that hope. In Barcelona, Ferrari's Friday had looked unremarkable too, and it had turned into a win. So when the long-run data in Austria put both red cars off the pace, behind Mercedes, behind both McLarens, even level with a struggling Red Bull, half the paddock told themselves the same comforting story. They're sandbagging. They're hiding it. Wait for Sunday. They were about to be proven painfully wrong. And on Saturday, the theory looked golden. Ferrari closed the gap. Leclerc qualified 2nd. Hamilton 3rd. 2 red cars on the 2nd and 3rd spots on the grid, with only George Russell's Mercedes ahead after a dramatic late pole, set as Max Verstappen crashed his Red Bull out of the final seconds of qualifying. It looked exactly like the Barcelona script repeating itself. It wasn't. Now pay attention to this, because this is where the real story lives. The Red Bull Ring is one of the shortest laps in Formula One, and the first half of it is almost all power. 3 long straights, stitched together by uphill corners, in air hot enough to cook a set of tires. It is, in other words, the exact circuit designed to expose the 2 specific weaknesses Ferrari had spent all season trying to hide. And this is the part that makes the Red Bull Ring so revealing. On a normal lap, a car's strengths and weaknesses get averaged out a bit of straight, a lot of corners, the good and the bad blending together. But this track is short and lopsided. It hands you a huge chunk of full throttle running and then a tight, twisty downhill section with almost nothing in between to disguise either one. So if you're strong in the corners but weak on the straights, there is nowhere to hide it. The circuit doesn't average your problems out. It puts them under a microscope and turns the magnification all the way up. Weakness 1 is straight line speed. Picture 2 cars side by side out of a slow corner. One fires down the straight and pulls clear. The other claws at the air and never quite closes the gap. That's not a small detail at a track like this. If you can't pass on the straights, you get stuck in the dirty, turbulent air behind the car in front. And that's where weakness 2 begins. Weakness 2 is heat. When a Ferrari sits in traffic in this kind of temperature, the tire surface overheats. An overheating tire slides. A sliding tire overheats even more. It becomes a cycle that feeds itself, and once it starts, there is almost nothing the driver can do to stop it. The grip simply melts away, lap after lap, while the cars ahead drive off into clean air. Think about what that actually feels like from inside the cockpit. You come out of a corner, you ask the car for grip, and for a fraction of a second it isn't there. The rear steps out. You catch it, you lose a tenth, the tire gets a little hotter, and the next corner is slightly worse than the last. You're not crashing. You're not making mistakes. You're just slowly, helplessly going backwards, and the camera barely shows it. This is the kind of problem that hides from the highlights reel and lives entirely in the data. And here's the cruel irony. The big A2O engine upgrade, the one everyone credited for Barcelona, was actually built partly to help with heat, with a new cylinder design meant to burn cleaner when temperatures climb. So why didn't it save them in the hottest race of all? Hold that question. It matters later. If you like technical Formula One breakdowns that most channels never bother to explain, subscribe. This channel is built for exactly this. Sunday, lights out. For a few glorious corners, the dream held. Hamilton got ahead of his teammate early and sat second, hunting Russell. Then, Verstappen arrived. The two of them fought wheel to wheel, corner after corner. Hamilton defended brilliantly through the twisty middle section, even taking a position back. But every time they hit a straight, the truth showed up in plain sight. Verstappen had the legs. Hamilton didn't. And eventually, on the run to turn 6, the Red Bull simply drove past and took second for good. Watch that fight back, knowing what you now know, and it reads completely differently. In the corners, Hamilton was right there, quick, committed, every bit the 7-time champion. He even forced his way back ahead once, refusing to give up the place. But then something kept happening. Each time the track straightened out. The gap that Hamilton had fought so hard to close in the corners simply opened back up by itself. He was winning the parts of the lap that depend on the driver, and losing the parts that depend on the car. You could see a great driver being quietly betrayed by the machine underneath him. That was the moment the illusion cracked. Not a crash, not a failure. Just a quiet, undeniable fact written into the speed traces: the Ferrari could not hold position on the one part of the lap that mattered most here. And then Ferrari rolled the dice. A Williams stopped on the start-finish straight, triggering a virtual safety car, a moment where the whole field slows and a pit stop suddenly costs far less time. Ferrari pounced and put Hamilton onto the hard tire, the compound that, as it turned out, was the one to be on. On paper, it was the move that could rescue his race. On paper. Because the gamble only works if you can then use the fresher tire to attack and pass. And that is the one thing this Ferrari could not do. Stuck behind cars he simply couldn't get by on the straights. Hamilton's tire advantage bled away into the hot Austrian air. The overheating cycle did the rest. After the second stint, Ferrari didn't just slow down. They vanished from the fight entirely. And here's the proof it wasn't just one driver having a bad day. On the other side of the garage, Charles Leclerc, who had qualified an excellent second, was sliding the exact same way. Down to 8th. 2 cars. 2 very different drivers. The same Saturday promise. The same Sunday collapse. When both drivers fall apart in identical fashion, you're no longer looking at a mistake. You're looking at a characteristic of the car. And characteristics don't get fixed by a better strategy call. They get fixed in the wind tunnel, back at the factory, over months. Would you have gambled on that tire under the safety car? Ferrari did, and it quietly fell apart. So who do you really blame here, the strategy call, or the car that made the strategy impossible? Afterwards, Vasseur didn't hide from it. He admitted the team had overpushed in the opening laps, been forced to change the plan, and watched everything go in the wrong direction. He called it a lesson. Sky's analysts were blunter, pinning the whole afternoon on 2 things: compromised straight-line speed and overheating. Exactly the 2 weaknesses we just traced. The damage didn't stay on track. Hamilton finished 5th, Leclerc 8th, and Russell's win didn't just cost Ferrari a podium, it cost Hamilton 2nd place in the World Championship. handed straight back to the very Mercedes driver he'd taken it from weeks earlier. Kimi Antonelli now leads on 171 points. Russell sits second on 131. Hamilton has dropped to third on 125. And that swing is the part that should worry Maranello most. Just a few weeks earlier, after Barcelona and a strong run, Hamilton had climbed to second in the standings and the narrative was all about momentum. One hot afternoon in Austria didn't just stall that momentum, it reversed it, and handed the position straight back to the Mercedes he was supposed to be chasing down. In a championship where the leader keeps banking points like clockwork, going backwards on a weekend you expected to score is not a setback. It's a warning. If you're still watching this far in, you're exactly the kind of fan this channel is built for. Subscribe now, because the most important part is next. Here's the detail almost nobody said out loud. Barcelona, the race that started all the hype, is a high degradation, cornering heavy circuit, a track that rewards exactly what Ferrari are good at and quietly forgives what they're bad at. It didn't prove Ferrari had fixed their car, it proved they had found a track that hid the flaw. Austria, 3 weeks later, was the opposite kind of circuit. Same car, same drivers, same upgraded engine, a completely different verdict. That's why the data from one short Austrian lap matters more than a trophy from Spain. The trophy told a story Ferrari wanted to believe. The data told the story that's actually true, that until they solve the straight-line deficit and the heat sensitivity together, this car will keep qualifying like a contender and racing like a midfielder every single time a circuit dares to test it. And remember that question from earlier, why the new engine, built to handle heat, didn't save them in the hottest race of the year? Here's the uncomfortable answer. An upgrade can lift one weakness while leaving the other completely untouched. The new unit may well burn cleaner in the heat than the old one did, but it doesn't change the shape of the car on a straight, and it doesn't stop a tire cooking when you're trapped in someone else's wake. Ferrari didn't bring the wrong upgrade. They brought an upgrade that only fixes part of a problem they'd convinced themselves was already solved. And the championship picture makes that brutal. Mercedes haven't been beaten in qualifying all year. Antonelli looks ice cold at the front. Even Russell's pole lap reportedly had time left in it. So ask yourself if Ferrari can't win when the track suits them, and the heat is on. Where exactly is the next win supposed to come from? Look at the season in full, and the scale of the task is staggering. Mercedes won the opening 6 races of the year, one after another, before Hamilton's Barcelona win finally interrupted the streak. That single victory was supposed to be the moment the fight truly began. Instead, Austria suggests it may have been an exception rather than a beginning. Red Bull, meanwhile, have transformed their own car and look like they've leapt ahead of McLaren on raw pace. The midfield giants are converging. And Ferrari, for all the noise around Barcelona, are still searching for a car that works on every kind of circuit, not just the friendly ones. Before the final twist, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the next F1 investigation, because this story is only going to get bigger. So here's where we end up. Barcelona made the world believe in a Ferrari comeback. Austria's data revealed that the comeback was a mirage reel only on the right track, on the right day. The question for Maranello is no longer whether they can win again. It's whether they can win anywhere the straights are long and the air runs hot. And until they fix that, every Ferrari celebration will carry an asterisk that only the data can see. If you enjoyed this documentary, subscribe for more Formula One stories, technical breakdowns, and the hidden details most channels walk straight past.